I get started with a drawing, and we are doing an animal. And so if we're gonna start with drawing again using our grid, the 3x4. So hopefully you already created your grid nice and light, and we are going to just follow along each square and hopefully get a good foundation for our drawing. So first we're going to start in this block here. I'm going to start along the bottom, and I'm looking again for where it enters the box and where it exits. The top part of the little dog's ear. This is a little sheepdog. Thought it was really cute. And I think I need to actually bring it up a little bit higher so the ear comes in, and then the top of the head goes across and it's on an angle. Any of these little details that I notice, they're going to be pretty dark. Comes you can see across and almost fills in a good bit of this top square. And it is a little harder to tell with watercolor some of the defined details. So if you're using a different photo, you might want to pick one that's a little bit less sketchy than the one I picked, which I thought would be not too challenging, but might have my work cut out for me. I've done just the edges. I'm looking at outside shapes. Obviously, as we paint, we're gonna have to notice the colors from the original source, and I will work through adding those. So one thing I do want to notice is some of these dark outlines. Even if we can't see the colors, we know that it's a dark shape. Okay, so I'm going to fold my paper down so I can work on the next 3 cubes. I just shift it down and I try to look for halfway points. So even within these blocks, you can see that this eye is right through that halfway point, and then this eye is raised, it's on an angle, and it's above the halfway point. So I do want to keep that in mind. So even finding the halfway point here first, knowing this eye is going to be somewhere over here, and then it's going to be on an angle. Okay. Go ahead and draw this the centering line, the light line that goes along the nose, and it comes right underneath this halfway point here to create the front of that nose. And it's swinging down a little wider and goes to about the halfway point here as well. Don't want to go past that. That's just to get us that indication. The nose, we're going to have a little corner of the nose popping up. On this side, the little hair. So I'm just kind of ruggedly outlining that in. And then The eye is on a tilt, and it's like a nice almond shape. The center of the eye is gonna have a little reflection in the middle. Eyes has a little bit more of a light spot to it. It almost looks a little bit bigger. I try to keep that the same size. Round pupil, and in this case there's multiple highlight parts along this corner here, in the center, along the edge. There's a couple little smaller ones on this side here. Those little edge here. Smaller details might be helpful to add, like there's a lighter spot above the eye and beneath the eye. We do want to keep our tone nice and light because the watercolor doesn't always cover those shapes. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and keep going on. I'm working my way this way now. The edge of the little ear comes across, and there's that dark shadow we're gonna have. I have a little bit of fur. We can always make that longer with some dark for where it exits, so it's a little past the halfway point. It's exiting right there. All right, we're gonna continue to work on adding features as we move down. I'm gonna fold it again. Next squares, I'm gonna focus on adding nose. Here we have the front of the nose actually comes mostly in this box here. It's gonna have a nostril. Part of the nostril is in this box and part of it is above it. On this side as well. You have to erase multiple times. The nose shape is a little bit different than some, and when you're trying to go a little fast, sometimes that shape doesn't come as easily. A fairly short little muzzle on this side because we see most of this side, so I want to go ahead and draw the edge curved, and it just comes up along this side. Gets a little shorter on this side. A bunch so I can refine the edges and I don't get too dark. Okay, we're looking here at the tongue. It comes beneath, and it goes a little bit on this side. And then I'm looking where it starts. It starts right on this side of the muzzle. It goes on this side of the tongue and underneath. there's a nice white shape here in this box, and you can create that just by looking where the white starts. It's gonna have that like curl, and then there's gonna be some of the fur behind it. There's a couple shadow spots along that side, and then if you go ahead and look at the next shape, it just kind of flares out. Opposite side, we're gonna have, look for that same shape. There's gonna be a white area that goes in the front, so we're gonna have some swoop lower than the halfway point. And on this side, kind of being a little bit sketchy here as I fill in these a little bit more subtle features. More sketchy. So this middle block is going to have some transitions. This part is white and this part is dark. Now you can kind of unravel it. Look for anything you may have missed. I would definitely go back and look at these, the nostril shapes. Look for highlights where you're going to reserve the light on the nostrils and on the top of the nose. There's going to be a highlight where the light hits. Be some darks and then some middle values towards the front of the nose. Kind of playing it out a little bit. And there is the start. So it's good to have a rough sketch, even if we change as we go. We need something to start. So this is a great place to start. Do is go ahead and soften any lines. You do maybe want to keep some general lines as a guide, but I'm going to go ahead and erase mine almost completely since I have most of the information I need for the drawing. I do like sometimes to have just like a faint line so that when I'm working with the grid, I can continue to work on square by square in some senses. But you really don't work as much square by square when you start watercoloring because you start to have to look for the shape as a whole. So we're gonna get our watercolor things out. Challenging me, I'm gonna be using the same paints, and hopefully we can work on this together. First, we're gonna work on the eyes again, because they're probably the most challenging. So you're gonna start really with your smallest brush, wet, and we're gonna work with light brown at the beginning. If you can see, I've kept the part here nice and light. This is gonna be a super light brown. In the center, it's gonna be dark black with these two reserved highlights, and then a highlight in the corner. And then we're gonna outline this with a pretty dark black. So let's get started. Here, we're gonna start off with the pupil, and I'm actually starting with a light brown pupil. I know last time we worked with black at the very end, and so that's kind of what I'm going to continue doing. Going to mix a little bit of a gold color with my brown to create this very light highlight beneath. And then going to jump to my black. You don't want a ton of water. You just need a little bit to activate the color that you need. You can start pretty light, but what I want to do is just to start adding basically just an outline to create contrast. It's really hard to see what the eye's doing unless you have some comparison of shade of value. And I'm going to go ahead and keep this corner light, and then I'm going to start to create a light black the iris light because it's easy to always go darker. But if you go too dark at the beginning and you mess up, it's hard to remove. So that's the start. It's going to be nice and dark up at the top. I want to make sure to reserve my highlight here, and there is a little bit of highlight at the top there. So you can kind of continue to revisit your picture that you're working from. And know you can always add a little bit of warmth to your eye. If you don't want to go straight black in the center, you can mix a little brown with it, and that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to go back around my highlights with my dark brown. This light brown here now really looks nice and light, and that encourages me to go back and darken through light at the beginning. Of the eye, we might come back in a little bit and add some gray to this side here. It's not quite as light all the way around, and I might bring some brown across. I might go ahead and go and complete that half circle right there. So great start. And do similar on the other side. I'm going to start with my goldish, lightish brown. I'm actually going to add a little bit of my burnt, more brick brown, this lovely color here. Starting light, we're going to work our way in the inner part of the eye here. An outline. There's going to be a reserve of white on this side, and then there's going to be a black outline again. So again, we're starting nice and light. It does help as the more you do this, you can kind of get confidence that you're not going to mess up if you start light. So I reserved the center point here. It's not going to be completely white, but it's going to be lighter than the surrounding black. Black outline. I'm going to start fairly light. area over here. Go ahead and with very little water, with a tiny bit of brown mixed in with my black, I'm going to go ahead and create that central tip of my brush, and great start. Eyes, and what I wanted to do together was the eyes, the nose, the tongue, and then some of the fur. So we're gonna go ahead and jump to the nose. I'm gonna close in, make sure you can see what I did with the eyes. About to do the nose. Going to be very similar, and that you're gonna work from light to dark. I'm gonna start with a small brush. I'm going to work with a little bit of gray first, and I'm actually gonna mix it a little bit with a little bit of blue. The image that I'm using has a nice light, fun blue, and I'm gonna use that to help create some of the light area in the nose. I'm gonna start up here. I reserved this highlight up at the top. I'm gonna keep that nice and white. Eventually it's gonna be this light blue, but I'm gonna start off with, remember to start off light. And I'm going around where the nostrils are gonna be. And I'm just slowly coming down towards the front of the nose here. And then I'm gonna stop, and I'm gonna do it slightly under, close to these white areas. Maybe a lighter color, so I want to go ahead and add a little bit of that lighter color. And then we're going to add a middle value. So I'm going to go ahead and clean off my brush. I'm going to mix a little bit of the gray just with water and add a tiny bit of black. Add a little bit of water to your black if you don't want gray. I'm just trying to make a fun tone, and I think gray sometimes adds an extra layer of color. So I'm going around and kind of blending in here the blue. I'm just adding some black along, or some gray. That's gonna help tie things in together. And the gray is gonna come underneath, around the nostrils. So some of the lighter gray goes around the bottom on either side and in the inside, closer to that center line. Have that, you're ready to add your darkest value. So I'm going to start with just a little bit of water with my black, not super dark yet. You could always come back and add a little bit darker. And I'm going to start sweeping in from the side and around, creating that full that's nice and dark on the edge. Color is in the center. Part of the nose. and it's just a little bit darker than that gray, so we might have to blend it in a little bit with a wet brush, but I want to make sure to get nice and dark inside the nostrils. Don't want to lose your drawing here, so it's good to work slowly if you can. Nostrils nice and curved, and then go back and add you want. So I'm gonna pull I keep toggling or going back from your painting to the image that you're looking at. And smooth things. I'm gonna go ahead and go over that highlight with a little bit of just water and bluish gray. I'm gonna keep these two things pretty light. I'm gonna add a little bit of gray underneath. Our lovely nose. Work on adding the tongue, which shouldn't be too complicated, and then I will go ahead and start adding a little bit of the fur, kind of going around the light areas, and I hope you will have fun with that. So to get started, we first need to make the color for the tongue, which I'm going to use a larger brush, more of a medium brush, and I'm going to clean off my palette, which I probably should have done for you, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to make a very light pinkish purple, and then it will be lighter when we add water, and then we'll add a little bit more of like a purpley gray color for the shadows. So we're going to keep the end of the tongue here nice and light, and it's going to get darker as the roof of the mouth would go over the tongue. So we're going to start back here, and we're almost going to just leave that front area of the tongue almost white. I'm kind of wanting it to stay fairly light, and we don't want a ton of pigment or color on our brush, just because we don't want it to stick out too much. So I'm going to add a little bit of purple. You might want to add a tinge of brown to it to kind of make it a little bit more subdued. And add towards this back while it's still wet. I pre-drew to remind myself that it had a shadow back there. Many times you want to pre-draw your shadow shapes so that you do not forget that they are there. It's hard once you start painting sometimes to remember all the details. So I have this edge here, and I want to kind of lighten up over here where I didn't want my purple to kind of spread out too much. So I'm just gonna bring that back, and that's gonna really pop a lot more once we have our fur in the background. Okay, so there is our lovely subtle tongue. We might want to add just a little bit more grayish purple. Pressing it down. I don't want to over blend, to be leaving a little bit of a highlight on that edge. Here is our darker tone. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and add and make a lovely blue and gray and black for our fur. And what I want to start off with is just a light gray to kind of get us started. And I'm going to go ahead and mix a little bit of black with it. And this is just going to start creating our outlines for our main shapes. So I'm just going to lightly go around the white of the muzzle, and I just want to create just like a outline just to get things going, so we don't have that blank canvas feel. But the second thing I'm going to do is to go over where my lighter shapes are, and that's going to help show us then where our darker shapes need to be. There's that outer edge there, and there's some outlines of lighter shapes along where the eyes are, and so I kind of wanted to create a grayish blue, and I really, because I'm using this example of that has a lot of fun blues in it. So I'm going to use plenty of water, and I'm going to go, there's like right above the eye on the right, underneath the eye, muzzle, sweeping along underneath the right eye before it gets dark. There's a nice light gray. And I had to draw these shapes in first before I went ahead and painted them, but so you do want to kind of look for those shapes first and draw them, because it's a lot harder once you get painting. Okay, then there's this lighter strip along the edge and this grayish part down here. And now it's kind of the fun part where you can add the darks and lights as you go. I do think keeping your grays a little bit more blue can be a fun way to add interest to the painting. They had this really fun background of like a light blue, and if you want, you could kind of almost give yourself a head start by just giving yourself a background color just to help it get going, kind of feel like you have more done maybe than you might feel you have done. But you can just, the backgrounds are really fun and relaxing to do, and they welcome just play and enjoyment in a painting. Colors would complement your painting. front of the little dog, there are some light blue little shadows, and right above the nose, I'm using a light brush or a bigger brush so that I can put those on and they'll be lighter automatically because I have a big brush with more water in it. If you start sometimes with a bigger brush, it's easier than to go back and add more detail with a thinner brush that's going to have more pigment. All right. And I'm noticing a lot of really cool purples and blues within the fur. So you can even kind of have fun with it. And but before you start playing a little bit more, I'm gonna go ahead and add some of the dark shapes. So right around the eyes, there's a couple really nice deep dark shapes, and I'm gonna go ahead and add those. A little bit more pigment than I meant to get. Large brush, gotta be careful. You may want to just add a little bit of water as you go, and I'm looking for these nice dark the eye. There's kind of these darker shadows, and then before it transitions to those light blue details. So I wanted to make sure to keep those, and it is going to look weird at first. Keep going. I just dropped my brush. Gray spot on his nose. Be all nice and light. So take your paper towel, and now it's just gonna have a little bit of a gray tinge, but nothing serious. So you wanna keep going with these details along the sides. Underneath my blue-gray shapes. Wet, you could kind of mix the colors there. Makes a really cool, colorful look. it'll start looking a little bit odd. So you can go ahead and add a little bit of your black back into the light areas. You may also have to add your back in.